There is a mystery that has danced through time, one that has intoxicated poets, moved warriors, and haunted even the most rational minds. It is not merely beauty that holds a man captive. It is not charm alone that compels his soul to surrender. The true magnetism, the one that obsesses him beyond reason, lives in the invisible realm, the realm of feminine energy. This energy cannot be fabricated. It cannot be learned through mimicry or performance. It must be awakened. It is ancient, powerful, and deeply rooted in the unconscious, and today we will illuminate its secret. The woman who captivates the soul of a man, who lingers in his thoughts like a haunting melody, is not the one who seeks to please or win approval, but the one who is anchored deeply in her own essence, unshaken by trends or opinions, untouched by the constant need for reassurance. For she does not perform to be seen, she radiates from a source within, one that is ancient and sovereign. A kind of inner knowing that whispers, "I am enough," and that inner voice becomes her compass, her rhythm, her signature, moving her through the world with a sense of quiet confidence that does not shout, but is undeniably felt. And when a man meets such a woman, he senses something rare, something he cannot name or explain, something that escapes his grasp yet pulls him closer, because she is not grasping at him, not reaching out in desperation, not asking to be chosen. She has already chosen herself, and that simple act of self-choosing shifts the entire dynamic. It inverts the usual chase, for she does not ask for attention. It arrives uninvited. She does not audition for love. It orbits around her, curious, drawn, compelled. And what makes this essence so powerful is its independence. Not the brittle, performative independence that masks fear, but the soft, rooted kind, the kind that knows she is whole, with or without, the kind that values connection but is not afraid of solitude, the kind that listens to her intuition before the noise of the world, and that intuition, refined by presence, becomes a force field, one that tells her when to open, when to walk away, when to lean in, and when to let go, not because she is playing a game, but because she trusts the sacred timing of life. And from this trust arises a posture of grace, and from grace, power, the kind of power that is not domineering or loud, but unshakable. And a man senses this stability, this rare kind of stillness in her presence, the kind that does not need to be filled or rescued or saved. And paradoxically, it awakens something in him, not the desire to protect her as one would a fragile thing, but the yearning to stand beside her, to be worthy of such presence. Because in her wholeness, she invites him to find his own, not by fixing or guiding or mothering, but simply by being. And this being is not passive, it is magnetic. It is the silent drumbeat of a woman who is fully in herself, not lost in roles or masks, not buried under other people's expectations, not performing femininity as a strategy, but embodying it as truth, as art, as sacred frequency. And from that frequency arises an unspoken language, one that the masculine cannot resist, because it speaks not to his ego but to his soul. And his soul, long starved of depth, of beauty, of the archetypal feminine, awakens, not in lust, but in reverence, not in conquest, but in curiosity, not in domination, but in devotion. And this is the true secret, the one that cannot be learned by technique or stolen through imitation. It must be remembered, lived, breathed into each moment, and as she walks through the world, not seeking to be seen, but simply refusing to be unseen, her presence begins to rewrite the room, to recalibrate the energy around her. For she is not reactive, she is radiant. And this radiance is not a light she shines for others to notice. It is a fire she tends within herself, a sacred flame that says, "I know who I am." And it is that knowing, that quiet certainty, that makes a man obsessed not with possessing her, but with understanding her, protecting her essence without caging it, standing in awe of a force he may never fully understand, but can never again ignore. Feminine energy in its purest and most magnetic form is not simply the display of emotion, but the embodiment of emotional depth, not chaos or volatility mistaken for passion, but a richness of feeling that is rooted, intentional and wise. And when a woman steps into this emotional depth, she no longer reacts out of impulse or insecurity. She no longer uses her emotions to manipulate or prove her worth. Instead, she becomes a conduit for truth, allowing her emotions to flow through her like a river, not to flood or overwhelm, but to cleanse, reveal, and connect. And in her presence, a man feels something unfamiliar, yet profoundly comforting. For he is invited, often for the first time, into a space where depth is not feared, where vulnerability is not a threat, where silence can be sacred, and her ability to hold emotional presence without trying to fix or flee from discomfort creates a rare atmosphere of trust, one where a man realizes he is not required to perform strength or hide his wounds. Because she does not run from darkness. She understands it, having faced her own. And this understanding gives her an unspoken authority, the kind that does not need to be shouted or proven, the kind that is simply felt. And this feeling becomes a sanctuary for the masculine, who in so many parts of the world has been taught to bury emotion, to armor his sensitivity, to equate feeling with weakness. Yet in her presence, that old script begins to dissolve, not because she tells him to be different, but because she shows him that depth is not destruction, that emotion is not instability, that true connection does not happen at the surface. And this showing is subtle but powerful. It happens in the way she listens, with her eyes, in the way she pauses instead of reacting, in the way she breathes through tension rather than resisting it. And in doing so, she becomes the embodiment of emotional safety, not because she is always calm, but because she is always real. And this realness is magnetic, because it creates contrast in a world obsessed with pretending. And in that contrast, a man discovers what he did not even know he craved: the freedom to feel, the permission to explore the fullness of his emotional world without fear of being shamed or diminished. And the woman who holds this emotional depth becomes unforgettable, not because she demands attention, but because she offers something few can: a reflection of the soul, not through performance but through presence. And this presence is not passive, it is deeply alive, deeply attuned. She knows when to speak and when to stay silent, when to embrace and when to pull back, because she is not governed by fear but by intuition, and her intuition is sharpened by her willingness to feel, to move through discomfort, to sit with what others avoid. And this willingness becomes her power, a kind of emotional intelligence that doesn't just understand feelings, it speaks through them, like a melody that bypasses logic and goes straight to the heart. And in that heart space, a man does not just desire her body, he begins to crave her presence, to seek out the feeling he has in her energy, even if he cannot name it, because it is rare, because it awakens something that had been buried, something raw, true, sacred. And in that awakening, he becomes bound not by obligation or fear of loss, but by the soul's recognition of something it once knew and thought it would never find again. And that recognition, born in the emotional depth of the feminine, becomes the silent thread that pulls him back again and again, not just to her, but to himself. Because in her presence, he finds more than affection. He finds feeling, and in that feeling he finds truth, and in that truth he finds the obsession that logic cannot undo. There is something profoundly alluring about mystery, about the energy that cannot be fully known, predicted, or possessed. And the woman who embodies this kind of mystery does not do so to manipulate or play games, but because she herself lives in a state of constant unfolding, never fully arrived, never completely defined. She is a process rather than a product. And this makes her endlessly fascinating, for in a world that rewards predictability, that seeks to categorize, control, and label everything. She defies the structure by simply being too vast to be captured, too fluid to be explained, and a man finds himself captivated not by what she shows, but by what she withholds. Not because she is hiding, but because she understands that not all of her is meant to be given away at once. She is not afraid of space, or silence, or the unknown. She lets him wonder, lets him lean in, lets him feel the pull of curiosity without rushing to satisfy it, and in that restraint, in that elegant self-containment, he feels the pulse of something ancient and sacred, something that calls to the part of him that is tired of superficiality, that is starving for depth, for the sacred dance between discovery and surrender, and she becomes the dance itself, sometimes playful, sometimes still, sometimes intense and other times gentle, never just one thing, never fully knowable, and yet always authentic, and this authenticity is what separates her mystery from manipulation, because there is no act, no calculated seduction, no script she is following. She is simply present with herself, present with the moment, not bound by the need to please or predict. And in this presence, there is a kind of confidence that does not need to announce itself. It just exists, like the moon does, silent but mesmerizing, always shifting yet constant. And her mystery lies not in what she hides, but in the layers she reveals, slowly, naturally, as trust is built, as intimacy deepens. As connection matures, she does not flood him with access to her world, she lets him earn it, not out of pride, but out of reverence for her own soul, for she knows that what is sacred should not be rushed, and this knowing elevates her. It turns every moment with her into an invitation to experience something meaningful, something rare. And the more he experiences her, the more he realizes how little he actually understands. Not because she is confusing, but because she is deep. And her depth cannot be measured in a single conversation or moment. It requires presence, patience, and a willingness to let go of control. And in that letting go, he becomes transformed, no longer the pursuer chasing an image, but the seeker drawn toward a presence. And that presence becomes an obsession, not because it is elusive, but because it is alive, constantly evolving, constantly moving in ways that reflect life itself. Unpredictable, beautiful, sometimes chaotic, always meaningful. And this reflection pulls at something primal within him, something that longs not for possession, but for immersion, for surrender to the unknown, and she becomes the unknown he chooses, over certainty, over logic, over all the things he thought he wanted, because in her presence he remembers that the soul does not crave what is explained, it craves what is felt, and what is felt in the presence of true feminine mystery is not fear or confusion, but awe, the kind of awe that silences thought, that expands perception, that awakens the heart. And when he finds her again, in his mind, in the spaces between distraction, it is not because she tried to stay there, but because her essence left a fingerprint on his spirit, one he cannot erase, one that calls him back not to her image, but to her energy, not to her promises, but to the experience of unraveling that he only ever felt in her quiet, sovereign mystery. There is a profound magnetism in a woman who carries both softness and wildness in equal measure, a harmony of contrasts that speaks to the deepest parts of a man's nature, the parts he often hides or tames in order to survive in a world that rewards control over authenticity. And when he meets a woman who is both sanctuary and wildfire, something inside him stirs, something ancient, something raw. Because she does not fit into a neat category, she is not only nurturing, nor only fierce, she is both. And in being both, she awakens a hunger in him that words cannot define. She can hold space with a quiet strength, make him feel seen, safe, and understood without trying to rescue him. And at the same time, she can ignite passion, challenge his edges, shake him out of stagnation, not with drama but with fire that is rooted in truth. And this duality does not confuse him, it mesmerizes him. For he realizes he cannot reduce her to a single archetype. He cannot tame her or predict her next movement, and yet he feels drawn, not out of lust alone, but because her essence speaks to his need for both refuge and intensity. She is the place where he can rest, and the flame that keeps him alive. And her softness is not weakness, it is an offering of the feminine in its pure form, gentle, receptive, intuitive, the kind of softness that disarms his defenses and invites him to lay down his armor without fear of being judged. While her wildness is not recklessness, it is untamed truth. It is the part of her that refuses to be molded by expectation, the part of her that runs with the wolves of her own knowing, not to escape, but to remain loyal to her spirit. And when these two qualities coexist within her, she becomes the embodiment of freedom, not because she rejects commitment, but because she commits first to herself, to her integrity, to the rhythm of her own soul. And this kind of commitment inspires a deeper form of devotion in him, one that is not born from control or possession, but from respect, because he sees that she is whole with or without him, that her love is a gift and not a transaction, and this realization shifts something in his heart. It dismantles the structures of dominance and submission that so many relationships unconsciously operate within, and instead it invites him into a dance of equals, a sacred union where polarity does not mean imbalance, but complement. And in that dance, he begins to experience a new kind of intimacy, one where he can be held without being smothered, challenged without being shamed, where he is inspired to grow, not because she demands it, but because her very presence evokes it. Her wildness calls to the parts of him that long to break free from emotional suppression, and her softness soothes the wounds that he has been told to ignore. And this balance does not come from perfection, it comes from authenticity, from a woman who has made peace with her contradictions, who does not hide her chaos or dilute her power, who can cry and roar and nurture and destroy in the same breath. And in doing so, she teaches him not to fear complexity, not to seek only the light, but to honor the shadows as well. And this honoring creates a bond that goes far beyond attraction. It creates reverence, a kind of sacred obsession that is not based on fantasy, but on the full acceptance of who she truly is. And in her presence, he learns that love is not something to conquer, but something to surrender to, not something to own, but something to witness in its ever-changing, beautifully untamed form. A man does not become obsessed with the woman who constantly tries to fix him, mold him, or correct him. He becomes obsessed with the woman who sees him fully, without needing to interfere with his process, who holds a mirror to his soul, not with judgment or agenda, but with quiet presence. A woman who does not try to become his therapist, his guide, or his savior, but rather remains rooted in her own center, witnessing him with clarity and compassion. And it is this witnessing that becomes transformative, because in a world where he is often told to perform, to achieve, to project strength at all times, being truly seen without expectation is both disarming and unforgettable. And she does not try to complete him or fill in his emotional blanks. She simply reflects what is already there, even the parts he has denied or rejected, the shadows he keeps hidden behind performance and pride. And this reflection is not forceful. It does not call him out or expose him in ways that feel unsafe. Instead, it gently invites him to come home to himself, to sit with what is real, to feel what he spent years avoiding. And in this space, she becomes not his fixer, but his mirror, not his solution, but his sanctuary. And this kind of connection penetrates deeper than surface attraction or compatibility. It touches the unconscious layers of him, the layers where true bonding takes place, the ones that are not impressed by appearance or status, but by energy, authenticity, and emotional resonance. And what makes her so powerful in this space is that she offers no demand. She does not try to change him into her fantasy or criticize him into becoming a better version. She simply stands in truth and allows him to meet it on his own terms. And that allowance becomes magnetic, because men are rarely given this kind of space. Most are met with either idolization or correction. Rarely neutrality, rarely truth without control. And so, when he finds himself in the company of a woman who does not shrink in the presence of his brokenness, nor inflate when he shows strength, but remains steady and connected to her own inner world, it disrupts his programming. It dismantles the walls he has carefully constructed, and through her presence he experiences a rare kind of intimacy. One that does not suffocate, one that does not chase or cling, but that holds space for his becoming, not as a project, but as a privilege. And he realizes over time that it is not her beauty alone that lingers in his mind, not her body, her voice, or even her intellect, but the way he felt when she looked at him with eyes that did not try to shape him, when she listened without preparing a response, when she sat with his silence and allowed it to be what it was. And in those moments, something began to soften in him. Something began to unravel, not in fear, but in surrender, because he sensed he had found someone who could witness the whole of him without flinching, someone who could walk beside him without dragging or pushing, someone who loved not the mask he wore, but the man behind it. And that kind of love cannot be explained. It cannot be replicated through strategy or forced effort. It must be lived. It must be real. And she was real. Real in the way the earth is real. Solid and unmovable, yet alive with depth and mystery. And this is what obsession is made of. Not fantasy or infatuation, but soul-level recognition. The sense that he has met someone who reminds him of the man he is still becoming. And in that reminder, he finds something he thought he had lost. The freedom to be seen without needing to be perfect. The freedom to be enough without needing to be more. And that freedom, offered without words, becomes the very reason he cannot let her go. The feminine energy that captures a man's soul is not taught in books. It is not captured in trends. It is a return, a remembering of your primal, soulful, unshakable truth. When you stop trying to become what the world tells you to be and begin to awaken who you already are, the obsession becomes inevitable. Because the most magnetic force in the universe is a woman who is fully herself. Let the world chase beauty, but let the soul chase the mystery that is you.